background. Also public trainer for NSF and a consultant. And then, yeah, my educational background is that I did a master's degree in food science at Stellenbosch, long time ago. And yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. I didn't get a nice, decent picture to put on that slide, though, unfortunately. Okay, so just an overview of what we are going to do today is we're focusing on incident management in the food sector. So first question, what is an incident? What is the difference between recall and withdrawal? Why is it important to manage effectively? International versus national recalls, cost of recalls, and what actually happens in a recall situation. Right, so the first one, what is an incident? An incident can really be anything that occurred that might result in the production or supply of unsafe, illegal, or non-conforming products. So it could be anything from malicious tampering, fire, flood, disruption of key services. If you're running a big cool room storage facility and now suddenly there's no electricity went out, you don't have a generator, you know, that's disruption to key services. And how do you handle that? Disruption to communication, suddenly your emails are down, you don't have staff available, no water, maybe failure of cybersecurity. Suddenly your whole system is hacked and you can't send out anything, have no communication with your clients. It's a very difficult situation at that moment. But it also obviously includes contaminated or unsafe products. So if you've at some stage found out that your product is unsafe or contaminated, you have to make a very quick decision. So just a question, like any incident can really lead to a recall or a withdrawal situation. But I think for this, any of this can lead to contaminated or unsafe product. And what actually makes a product unsafe or contaminated can be either one of three categories. So there's different categories of food safety hazards. We call them hazards because they can do harm. The first one is physical. So if there's a physical contamination, obviously it can be malicious or damage of machinery or equipment that sort of broke or caused introduction of any like glass pieces or anything into your product. Chemical contamination can be anything from if you're bottling wine, say you're a wine bottler and you're doing a CIP cleaning step where you circulate the cleaning chemicals in your pipelines, and then after that you have to start filling the wine again through the same pipelines. How do you make sure that they were not, that you've actually rinsed everything out and you don't contaminate the first few bottles with chemical residues in your product? Also, allergens included in that one is a very important topic for recalls. A lot of recalls happening worldwide because allergens were not declared on the labels of the product. And then biological hazards, anything microbial, we normally group them as pathogens. Pathogens would really make you ill, like Listeria, where what happened with the bologna issue in South Africa. E. coli, really, really bad pathogens that could, severely cause illness in consumers. Okay, so when you're sitting with this product and it's now contaminated and you're not, what do you do? And I think maybe some of you have already heard about a recall or a withdrawal and maybe not too sure what specifically is the difference between the two. So the first one, what is a recall? It really is the action to remove from sale and distribution and consumption any foods that may pose a safety risk to consumers. So a food recall may be initiated as a result of a report or a complaint from a variety of sources, So it can be anything from complaints in the markets, complaint from a consumer, complaint from wholesalers, agencies, can be a government issued recall. So you need to make sure a recall really is where you remove the product. Everything is already in the market. You are, you've got stuff on the shelves, you've got stuff in the DC, you've got food everywhere, and now you have to try and get all of that back and make sure that you have control over that, unsafe product. The difference with a withdrawal, if you go to the next one, thank you, is that any withdrawal, all the product is still under your control. So it's obviously much more, it can be done very much quicker without really involving the consumer and media releases and all of that. So the product would still be at the DC, or maybe even at your client's DC. Maybe if you're sending to a specific retailer, it can still be there, but there's no product on the shelves. So you don't need to recall any product from the consumer themselves. So that is the difference. And I think that is the importance. If obviously cost-wise also, if you can still just quickly get everything back and under your control and then decide what to do with all the stock, it really limits the risk to your business in the market. Okay. So for the next slide, please, Megan, the importance of effective incident management. So why is it really important? I mean, obviously we know we have to do it. It's a legal requirement, but also we want to make sure that our consumers are safe. It's a message that we want to portray to the industry and to the consumers, that we actually care as a food safety industry or food industry, and we want to make sure that no one obviously gets ill and there's no other consequences involved. Legislative requirements, so obviously it can be something that's governed by legislation. Brand and business reputation, we all know how important that is and how difficult it is to determine actually what the impact is if you have a sort of a bad recall. We haven't done it quickly enough. We haven't wasn't successful in locating all the product. Then for business continuity, and I think Megan also mentioned something like that, if there's a recall, and it actually takes some time. So when you've issued a recall, it's national recall, so now the government will become involved, the Consumer Goods Council will come involved, and it's something where they will potentially close your factory. So you'll be standing for that period until they've finished the investigation to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row, everything has been done. So that can become really an extended period, and that is very difficult then if you're standing for even a week or two, and you have no movement of stock that you can sell. Customer requirements also, it's if you have a recall and it's a specific customer whose product you had to recall, they might also think twice, if you can't handle it properly, to give you some more business in future. So that's also a problem. And then the last one, but not the least, is the actual cost involved in a recall. If you do it properly and you have your plans in place, and you know who to call, you've got your contacts, you are on top of it with stock management, your traceability is up to date, you've had a mock recall, then obviously all of that would contribute to lowering your costs involved, because it can become a very costly exercise.
Karin, I'm just going to interrupt you just for a second because we had somebody who had a question. So, Madalena, do you want to ask your question? Madeleine, you're just going to have to unmute yourself. Otherwise, you're welcome to also type in your question for us. Okay, we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay,
Carry on.
Is there someone there?
No, carry on, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Megan. I think the key about this whole actually the response time when you have to decide about, okay, is this now a recall or not? And we talk about the magic window. So when you sort of have this issue and you see, okay, there's potentially unsafe product somewhere in the market, what are we going to do about it? So companies typically benefit from a window of 24 to 48 hours, during which a financial market reaction to a crisis is limited. So the sooner you react, the sooner you get your potentially unsafe product out of the market, you really limit your risk. You protect your brand. You also, the image of caring for your consumers, all of that, and responding quickly, that is sometimes it's very supportive of your goal and your vision and mission of the company. So yeah, for the rest, it actually goes worse. So the longer you take, the worse the perception in the market is. So the market shares sort of, if you're a listed company, it can see definitely a price drop. A month on, the findings show a peak in the negative sentiment with 6 out of 10 companies affected. And if you really are very bad at doing this, and a year later or more, you don't really see your share prices regain pre-crisis levels. So it's very important always to make sure the narrower you can make your window or response time after a recall, the better for your business. Okay, so unfortunately, it didn't go well for a lot of guys. Megan, if you go to the next slide, please. No, it's fine. So there are quite a few examples of where it really went very well. It didn't go very well, it went very badly. In 2007, for a pet food industry, a company, actually, they were indicted because of very high levels of minerals in their product. In 2009, Peanut Corporation of America, they had salmonella on their product. They tried to sort of retest and do a few things, and some of the management staff actually went to jail. In 2011, cargo ground turkey, they had a recall of 35 million pounds of ground turkey. So it's something, we think of a recall and we think it's quickly, but 35 million pounds is actually quite a lot. This Hallmark Westland meatpacking beef company, they were bankrupt after investigation into animal cruelty, and they had to, it was also a recall of their product. And then in 2010, a Right Country and Hillendale Farm eggs, they also had to recall over 500 million fresh eggs. So these are the largest food recalls in history, and I think the one that was a very good example of a badly run recall was the peanut company. So yeah, I think going to jail is the worst case scenario after a recall. Right, so just a few examples. Other examples of international recalls is where maybe histamine in the fish industry, if you have poor temperature control, that can be something that could be a contamination in the product and make it unsafe. Flour, uncooked dough and batter, maybe it was contaminated with E. coli and salmonella. Sliced apple had Listeria on it. A range of chocolate bars was recalled, they had plastic in them. And then undeclared allergens. You can go to the next slide, please, Megan. And then in South Africa, we've also seen our fair share of recalls. I think sometimes the general public's not that aware of these recalls happening. but it is something that is sort of escalating, and bigger companies making it definitely more a bigger effort to get the product back. So some time ago, there were glass fragments in a lot of wine bottles, wine products that they had to export, and it was a big exercise to try and get and locate all that potentially affected product. Undeclared allergens that was in ice cream, cleaning agent in an apple juice product, Listeria. This is also a good example where they used an ingredient that was contaminated with Listeria or implicated in a Listeria outbreak in Europe, and then they had to do a forward traceability on all the product they actually produced using this ingredient, because they had to retrieve all of that from the market. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you've got very good suppliers and trusted suppliers, and they've got their systems in place as well.
Karin, sorry to interrupt you. Tell me, the contaminated products, once they dispose of them, are they disposed of in a particularly environmentally friendly way? Is that their focus, or is it more just to comply with government regulations to do sort of the bare minimum, I suppose? Sort of what are the regulations around disposal of contaminated products?
It differs between some of the industries. So if you're in the fish industry, the NRCS, they've got their own, they regulate the fish industry very closely. So they've got their own specific guidelines that they need to follow in that industry to make sure that, that unsafe product can't find its way back into the market. But I think in general, it would depend on the company itself to see, if it would be environmentally friendly or not. But the main goal would be to make sure that the product would be destroyed. You normally, you can't just dig a hole and bury it or something. It needs to, there is a licensed contractor that can come and remove your product. It'll either then go to an approved waste center, sort of like a Vissershoek in the Western Cape. And you'll obviously pay some money to get it destroyed, but that is then you get a certificate and everything to make sure that it was safely disposed of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Then just another big one is the Listeria outbreak. As you remember, in the meat processing plant with the bologna a few years ago, some 1,050 people got ill and 218 died, and there was a class action being filed against that company. And then going maybe a bit more recent, if you go to the next slide, please, a little bit recent this year, Shoprite Checkers issued a recall on canned tuna due to possible defect in the cans. So it was regarding the double seam of the cans. And they had to just remove everything from the shelf. Unilever had to recall a cup of soup because they actually put it in the incorrect packaging, and then there were allergens that was not declared in that specific packaging. And if you go to the next one, it was about baby formula. Also was recalled due to a potential pathogen. Megan, you can go to the next slide, please. Potential pathogen in the baby milk, and you can see how upsetting that can be, to consumers, and it would take quite a bit of convincing, I think, maybe for some young new mothers to buy that after a recall. So it's already something that's maybe a blemish on the company's profile. And then another one where Nestle had to recall chocolate bars due to potential glass contamination. And you can see this was February this year. I think the others were in April or May. And these were only a few ones of examples of recalls that happened this year. So there were actually quite a number of recalls recorded this year as well. And you can see when you go into the media messages, how they actually handled it, what the difference between some of the companies are, their approach on handling a recall. So all of this, I think, comes together to, to discuss the actual cost involved. So this was an article that they published in the Business Insider South Africa last year. And it really is just to say that it's, obviously everyone knows there's a cost involved. But if you think about the iTOO recall that they had, it was Tiger Brands. They had to get 20 million individual items back, and it cost them around 650 million rand. I mean, and that's estimated, so it could have even been more. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the reputational damages is sometimes harder to qualify. Would someone then, when you, after a recall, stand in front of the, in the shop, would you consider buying iTOO or a competing brand? So, but where does all this cost come from? With recalls, obviously you'll get a consultant in potentially if you feel not equipped, to handle a big recall like a Tiger Brands or anyone else. There's lab fees involved. Obviously, you need to then start testing your product, sending it out, and increase your testing frequency. A lot of communication costs involved. I'm just highlighting a few. Your actual product retrieval, the logistics involved, the trucks that you need to, now you have to drive around and try to get all these bits and pieces back to your facility. Maybe your facility is full, you don't have storage space for it, you've got to rent a new warehouse, get security there, make sure that the product is under control. Maybe cleanup costs, management's now working overtime, maybe you've got additional costs there. Maybe you lose your supply contracts, like I mentioned, if it's a specific client whose product was implicated. Any marketing costs, that will maybe double or triple. And then your reputational loss. Product replacement, if you've got an agreement with a specific client and you have to produce, you have to supply them with that product, you might have to go to a competitor and ask them if they can help you out and produce the product for you. Extortion, business interruption, brand integrity, all of that is really big cost implications associated with a recall. Okay, so what actually happens in a recall situation? I think, you can see all these graphs. There's a lot of different graphs actually everywhere available, but really what is sometimes happening is you don't estimate or don't expect the media to get involved so quickly. And sometimes it's so difficult to make that quick decision because now you're sitting with potentially, you're not sure, you're waiting for micro tests, but it sort of takes 3 to 5 days for the test results to come out. What do you do in the meantime? Do you just sit and wait for the test results? And by that time, when it actually comes out, maybe you've done more damage. So you have to have a workable scenarios in your recall procedure, your plan in your facility, where you think of different scenarios and sort of act them out, do a mock recall, sorry, to make sure that you have planned for all these eventualities. You won't be able to plan for everything, but as long as you've got the most of what you can do already in place. So remember the incident, obviously you'll get the complaints, and when you've decided, okay guys, we need to do a recall, you need to report the incident to the Consumer Goods Council, involve your recall team. Remember, this can also be on a public holiday. It's not something that can wait, so it will be something on a bank holiday or December holiday. So anything can happen, and at that time you need to be able to respond wherever you are. Then a traceability exercise. Your traceability should be very good, and your mass balance is actually just where you reconcile all your the production figures with what is where, how to locate all your stock. You evaluate your risk and decide on the appropriate action to take. Sometimes if it's a quality and it's just like a brand issue, you can just sort of or marketing issue, you can just remove or withdraw the product. Otherwise, if it's a food safety or other more serious situation, you must do a recall. But you need to decide on which action to take. And then also you need to obviously contact your clients. There's media statements that needs to be issued. You need to, as quick as possible, locate your unsafe product and get it back. There'll be inspections from the Consumer Goods Council or maybe other legal departments as well. And you'll potentially stop production until you are cleared again for production by government. And then you have to store and destroy all the unsafe product. And maybe if it wasn't a malicious contamination or something like that, you have to obviously identify what is the root cause of this and how do we prevent it from happening again. So is it malicious contamination? What was the actual incident that caused the unsafe product? Right, you can go to the next one. So just to explain, or just to give you a visual example of, I think the next two slides, just to show you how complicated it sometimes can be if you're thinking of your production. Maybe you're producing quiche as your final product, and you have to. Someone is saying to you, okay, one of your raw materials, the wheat, as you see on top here, the wheat is there's too much pesticides, the residues on it, on this specific batch that you used in your plant, and you now have to issue a recall on all your final product. So there's a lot of steps involved. There's a lot of places where product can hide, in storage, in production, in the final product. Maybe it was waste. So as long as you have to make sure that your systems and your traceability systems are up to scratch to be able to do all of that. If you look at the next slide, Megan. Yes, so this is actually just indicating to you where all the costs along the supply chain can come from, and you sort of also to see how complicated it can get. And the longer your supply chain, the more complicated it will get. If you use a lot of ingredients from a lot of different suppliers, maybe import some of your ingredients, obviously also the risk becomes that if they want to issue a recall, you have to do that on your end. So it's very important to make sure that your suppliers are approved and managed. So ingredients, suppliers, the product manufacturing process, what does your equipment look like? How do you manage your processes, storage, distribution? What does your distribution steps look like? The trucks that you actually transport the product in, on the shelf, everywhere that it actually can incur additional costs. Right, if you go to the next slide. Thank you. Just a little bit of services that we as NSF provide in the industry. We I think, like Megan mentioned in the beginning, prevention is obviously the best. You don't really want to sit with a recall or a withdrawal when you think of all the costs involved and all the legal actions and everything that can happen. So if we assist, we've got a lot of really very experienced consultants and people working for NSF in South Africa. Our head office is based in Stellenbosch, and but we've got consultants all over South Africa. So we can assist with the site and process assessments. If there's specific things they want us to check, if it's a group and they've got 4 or 5 or 30 different factories, and they want to do assessment and see if all the factories are following head office procedures and things. We can assist with that. Supplier risk management to help them to make sure that we don't have long supply chains, and evaluate the risk involved in each of the supplier. We can also assist with tailored crisis management scenarios. We can help them sort of do a mock recall and see how do they actually, you know, is it if someone phones in and you have to decide at 8 o'clock tonight, we need to recall. Is everyone available? How does it work? Will everyone just only be available tomorrow morning, or what is the situation? Then a review and update of withdrawal and recall management procedures. Are they sufficient? Do they have the correct contact numbers in there? Do they know what is legally required? Then crisis management training, we can assist with that, and troubleshooting and advisory visits. And then obviously I think the most important, in case of an actual recall, we then coordinate with the policyholder to review and advise their situation. Obviously we want to make sure that there's no unsafe product in the market, but we also want to limit the costs involved. So to make sure that it's a win-win on both sides, and really to do an effective recall. I think that is the biggest role that we can play in this instance. Yeah, so thank you. That's all from me. I think if you have got any questions, welcome to pop them to me.
Karin, thank you so much. That was so interesting. And I'm sure there are a million questions. I'm going to have a quick look in the chat just recently, and then I'm going to work back up just in case any of you missed the chat questions. We have a question from Gina. Gina, you asked about the presentation. Absolutely, we will share the presentation with you. And do we do recall within the automotive industry? It is, we do, but on the general liability side, remember here we're only talking food and beverage. So on the GL side, give Susie a call, she'll have a chat to you. There are some sort of restrictions depending on where and what in the automotive industry, but certainly Susie will be able to sort you out there. So yes to the automotive industry. Blueberry farmers, yes, we love blueberry farmers, so get in touch for that one over, that we will definitely have a look at. Let's see, Luando, why? Karin, can you tell us what would happen in the case where you've got an extortion threat? What is sort of the response and the process there?
Well, you would have to, obviously you develop your procedure as to say in your specific case, what would be the best option? So what do you use for payroll? All the, you know, if you're hacked and you're sitting with that, everything, you know, all the screens are frozen. Do you have an update? Is everything updated to the cloud somewhere? Is it maybe stored on a different server, not on site, somewhere else? You know, this is more in case of a fire or anything, but okay. Do you have your information available, and can you sort of just reinstall it again? Yeah. Or do you have to pay the 10 million rand before they unfreeze everything?
Absolutely. So guys, you know, there's just another one. There's a cyber exposure there as well. And so there's just sort of all of these risks that really are around for our clients that we just have to be so cautious of in the space they operate in at the moment. Right, Peter is throwing us a bit of a curveball, so I'm going to read his out. Karin, pay attention, this looks like a long one. Based on your examples on canned food recalls, this example he's given us. Company A is the manufacturer. He supplies canned food to Company B. No change to the product by Company B other than branding and distribution and sales. A recall due to contamination is triggered. The initial recall is triggered by Company B, product now under their control, but no doubt due to Company A being the manufacturer of the product, assume the recall is due to contamination of the original product that they've received from Company A. Can the cost be pushed down to Company A? no policy respond company A policy unless you have third-party recall cover. Could we expand on that a little bit? So you've got a manufacturer who's made something that the contamination originates from. It's gone through to a distribution who've branded it and done some things, but their branding has not impacted that contamination. I suppose the question is all about where does the liability lie and who's ultimately responsible for those costs, and can you recoup those?
I think, you know what, you will do your root cause analysis if it comes to that, you know, if you are company B, you'll do your root cause analysis, and if it's not something that could have been introduced at your facility, like if it's not, you know, canning, so you don't need refrigeration or anything, then if it's something that you would obviously discuss with company A, and if that is a claim that you would want to put in, you know, because of all your recall cost, it will become more of a legal issue or, you know, insurance issue. It's not something that, but definitely if you can prove that you didn't, you've got all your processes in place, so you've got your incoming inspections, maybe everything that they send to company B to say, this is why we say our product is safe, and you can, you know, also, is company B only a service provider, or do they actually own the product? Do they buy it in from company A? I think there's a few variables that you need to look at.
Okay, so I think ultimately, so just to summarize that, company B, if they had the right policies in place, it would respond to the actual issue and the incident. The recovery exercise is a separate sort of question, and they would deal with that separately. So nobody would be stranded in the sense of anybody fighting up front about liability and who's responsible and all of that. The incident needs to be managed first, and then that sort of liability discussion can happen afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. So also incredibly important within the risk management there is to understand that we need to have a very clear look at the contracts in place. It's incredibly important for your clients to ensure their contracts, especially if they've got back-to-back agreements and responsibilities clearly outlined within their agreements. It makes this liability process so much simpler than getting into a he said, she said. Just to very quickly, I want to share with you a couple of the other questions. Somebody asked about energy drinks. So in case you missed that, why that would be sort of on a higher risk under the CPR product. From a CPR perspective, due to the high, generally energy drinks are very high in caffeine and things like ginseng and all sorts of other weird and wonderful ingredients sometimes. So because of those being added drinks, the levels of unsafety or lack of safety for consumers and thereof, particularly in the US, have seen recalls triggered. So we do an expenses cover under a GL policy. So even where you have a client who perhaps cannot get the CPR cover because it's not maybe within our risk appetite because of the high claims frequency and possibility, we certainly can look at it under the GL product recall extension. So please always make sure you get in touch and check with us. Things change all the time, and we need to keep updated with those things. I think that was the main question that was asked otherwise. And then I think there are some hands up. Juanita, I'm going to try to allow you to talk. Please try and unmute yourself your side. I am very technically challenged on Zoom. I usually have lots of help on our side. We're product experts, not tech experts. But if you can, otherwise perhaps you can pop your question into the chat box and we can talk and check. We do have a few more minutes if there's any other questions. We do have 5 minutes left with Karin if you have any other questions. And I just want to also from our side just give you, here are Susie's contact details and Katya. So please take note if you have any questions specifically around the products as well as the risk management that comes with those products, please, you are most welcome to reach out to us. And then there are the contact details. So Susie looks after our general liability, and so the product liability fits into a broad form cover. There's Susie waving. And then Katya looks after all of our fun, risky stuff. And so she looks after our CPR product specifically. So if you have any questions around that, please feel free to get in touch. We do have a quick last question, I think, from Tash is question, when there is a food recall, who holds the food manufacturer accountability? Is it the government or food safety governing bodies? Is there space for food manufacturers to deny any responsibility? Karin?
No, not really. It will become a government situation. So they obviously, you do your recall. If you've initiated the recall, you do that recall, and obviously notify them as well, and they will do the follow up also after everything to see if you handled it correctly or not, and what processes you've got in place or preventative actions that you've now implemented to prevent anything from happening again. And if they are not feeling satisfied with that, you know, there might be other implications. But you will, it's not the certification body who would sort of, you obviously, if there's a recall, you need to, and you are being audited by NSF, you need to involve NSF as well, just to, or some of the other certification bodies, just to let them know, and they will do independent investigations to see if you can still be certified or not. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. We've got two quick questions I'm going to throw. One question was just around proposal forms. So yes, both products do require proposal forms. Please contact again Susie or Katya for proposal forms. Specifically, I think before, you know, we'd hate to waste anybody's time, is have a good chat to them about the kind of client you're thinking about, and they can give you that prop form and give you any advice around there. Sharon then just asked, how has load shedding impacted the industry, i.e. food contamination increasing? Have we seen sort of that knock-on effect within that space?
I think the most of the guys in the food industry, you know, they've got their ducks in a row. So especially the bigger ones, where there might be a bit of concern is the smaller guys who can't, you know, afford a generator or running a generator the whole time. But I think most of the guys are prepared.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have an amazing Tuesday, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much, everybody. Keep well.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.